Political developments like Donald Trump's election victory and the campaigning that led up to it involved themes like anti-immigration rhetoric, xenophobia, racism, and these seemingly prompted a spike in attacks against racial minorities, hate crimes, and this sort of thing. Perhaps more importantly, or equally importantly, groups like the Alternative Right movement, which is a right-wing organization that has links to white supremacist groups and ideas, were able to really rebrand some of the language that they use and enter the mainstream political debate from where they were excluded from previously. So to give an example, terms like human biodiversity, identitarianism, as well as white genocide are really used to actually discuss things like racial differences in society and their importance, or the perceived threat that multiculturalism and immigration poses to the predominantly white population of a country, or how there's a specific kind of Western identity that is actually under threat from external forces. So in Europe, there have been quite a lot of similar ideas that have developed over the last decade and a half, and particularly in recent years, groups like the German Pegida movement, which is an anti-Muslim immigration movement, have really risen to the fore and gained a lot of publicity and traction, particularly in light of the migration and refugee crisis that's taken hold in Europe over the last couple of years. But these ideas are also promoted in the longer term by groups like the counter-jihad movement, which promotes the idea that Muslim immigration poses an existential threat to what's perceived as a kind of Judeo-Christian Western culture and values. So really what these groups are putting forward is a kind of us versus them dynamic, where Muslims are put on one side and this perceived Western culture and values is put on the other, and these are seen as being incompatible with one another. Now, in practical terms, in Europe, this has really led to a spike, much like in the US, on attacks focusing on the identity group target sector. And what's really happened is for instance, a substantial increase in attacks on refugee centers. In Germany, the IHSJ's Terrorism and Insurgency Center recorded that in 2016, there was almost half of all attacks in the country focused on identity groups, and many of these were on refugee centers. In addition, the German Interior Ministry released data suggesting that in 2015, there was a 5-fold increase on attacks on refugee centers. And in general, there was a 35% increase in attacks conducted by right-wing extremist groups. When we're looking at terrorism in the Western world, often Islamist terrorism is really raised on a pedestal, but actually right-wing extremism and right-wing terrorism is also a serious consideration in both Europe and the US. In addition to all the small-scale attacks and violence, the kind of vandalism and hate crimes and physical assaults that we've seen and discussed, there's also been more serious cases of right-wing attacks, like the political assassination of Labour MP Joe Cox in the United Kingdom in June 2016. In places like Germany, what we're also seeing is some traditional right-wing extremist organizations showing more of an interest to stage larger attacks. So in mid-January of this year, there was an arrest of an 18-year-old man in possession of 155 kilograms of explosives in Germany. and local media later connected the man to local right-wing extremist organizations. So really, I think what's going to happen going forward is that there is going to be a continuation of the types of small-scale attacks that we've seen in recent years in both the US and across Europe. But there will also be an elevated threat of attacks by right-wing extremists or organizations using small arms as well as explosives with the aim of creating mass casualty and spectacular attacks.